Welcome back to week 9, the second part. We're going to look at chapter 11, being with others, forming relationships in young and middle adulthood. So we're going to take a look at what would it be like to go through life alone? What are some similarities between friendships and love relationships? So we talked a lot about friendships and how we started forming them. Now we're going to look at how those friendships differ and are the same as love relationships. And why do some people choose not to marry? And what percentage of marriages end in divorce? So think about these questions as we look through chapter 11. So we're going to begin with relationships. And our learning objectives for this is what types of friendships do adults have? And how does that differ from your adolescence and childhood friends? Do you have the same friends that you had when you were in high school? Or do you have different friends because your interests have changed? So we're going to look at that. And how do adult friendships develop? What is love? So what do you guys think? What is love? And how does it develop through adulthood? And what is the nature of abuse in some relationships? So let's take a look at friendships. Friendships are a major importance in adolescence and young adulthood, right? That's when we start to peers start to become your main influence. You start to develop these friendships between like ideas. Those become your big influencers, right? And they continue to be important throughout life. They're characterized by being predominantly based on feelings and reciprocity. So they're less emotionally intense than a love relationship and involves less sexual energy. And having good friendships boosts self-esteem. So just remember, friendship is a mutual relationship in which those involved influence one another's behaviors and beliefs. So you're going to look for people that, maybe think, like to do stuff that you do, or think kind of like you do. You get along well, those same similar interests. Now you don't have to be friends with people that because you go to school together. You actually choose, by the interests that you actually choose to do. And friendship quality is the satisfaction derived from the relationship. So let's take a look at adult friendships. They go through the stages of acquaintanceship, build-up, continuation, deterioration, and ending. It's the ABCDE model, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. People tend to have more friends and acquaintances in young adulthood than at any other time of life. And why do you think that? Right? You're in a lot of social settings, you're at college, parties, trying to figure out who you are. You're maybe in a lot of activities, more sports, clubs, so you're having that opportunity to meet things. You don't have the responsibility of family, maybe kids yet, so you have all this time to meet people. And life transitions, for example, getting married, etc., result in fewer friends and less contact with the friendships you do retain because you have more responsibility. You have to take care of another person, or you have responsibility to your mate. So let's take a look at what this ABCDE model is. So George Levenger saw relationships as having 5 stages that he referred to as the ABCDE model, which includes attraction, building, continuation, deterioration, and ending. And according to Levenger, these 5 stages related to any relationship. So it could be a friendship, a significant other, family. So let's take a look at each stage. So the attraction stage. And this usually begins at the first sight of someone. So if you ever heard that, love at first sight, that would be the attraction phase. You may be attracted to another's appearance, dress, or body language, face-to-face encounter, or by the stories a friend tells you. With the advent of cyber dating, you may be attracted to another because of similar interests, life philosophies, personality, or a photograph or webcam. So it could be very superficial. It's just that attraction stage, something that pulls you in, similar interests. You just look like someone that I'm attracted to, all those things. So it's superficial attraction. The second stage, the building stage, is where a potential couple or a friendship find common ground in personality, attitude, and interests, or anything with which to continue a conversation in the hopes of building a foundation for a relationship. So it's just finding that common interest. You meet someone at a party, you meet someone at the gym, you start talking and you're like, oh my gosh, I'd love to do that too. Or, oh, I love to go skiing and I was to Mammoth last year. So it's finding that common interest that connects you, that you can build on continuing talking and you find out you have a lot in common, and that starts to build the foundation for the relationship. The building stage is the stage in which relationships are ended before they are even begun because of an inability to find common ground. So it can go the opposite way. You're at a party and that one person loves to ski and you're like, I wouldn't step out in the snow, or everything you talked about, you just cannot find any common ground and all you're thinking about is getting away from that person. So it can go either way. It can build into a friendship or it could just cut it right in its tracks. The third stage is after two people, it's called the continuation stage. So after two people pass the building stage and have determined that the relationship is worth pursuing, so we chit chat and we're like, oh my gosh, let's get together. I'll give you my number. It could be dating or just even a friendship. They enter that continuation stage. And this is in which they put forth the effort to enhance the positive factors of the relationship. So an example of this would be a demonstration of affection, trust, commitment, lack of jealousy, equality in the relationship, and mutual satisfaction. So you both have to be getting something out of it, or both be happy that you're participating in it. During this phase, I is usually replaced by we, referring to that mutuality, like, oh, we're going to dinner, or we're going to go out of town. So you're building that couple. It is the indication that each party wishes to continue and deepen the relationship and is distinguished by cognitive interdependence. So the last two stages, deterioration and ending, are completely avoidable if parties remain committed to the continuation and relationship maintenance necessary for long-term success. So if you're having a good relationship, a lot of common interests, communication, respect, building up on that, and resolving differences, you may have a friendship for long-term or a relationship for long-term. So what happens when that doesn't? You don't keep those stages well. So first thing is deterioration, and that's when one or both parties no longer desire to remain in the relationship. They feel the relationship has declined past the point of saving, or they feel the cost is greater than the reward. Maintaining good interpersonal communication skills, resolving conflicts in an affable manner, or seeking professional help and guidance can prevent or stop the deterioration of the relationship. So if you get to this point and you feel like your friendship or your relationship has declined, you're not talking to each other, you're not, you kind of lost interest. So you can fix that going counseling, trying to things together. But if you can't get through that, then the next phase, the ending phase, is when the deterioration stage has not been stopped due to a passive response by one or both parties, sitting back and waiting for the issues just to resolve themselves, or going and getting help, which would be an active response, that seeking professional help that failed to reignite the relationship. The ending stage, though it can be extremely painful for all parties involved, it is not necessarily a bad thing because it allows both parties to grow, mature, and maybe learn from their past mistakes. So maybe you learn what you're not going to do in your next friendship or your next relationship. And then maybe it taught you something about yourself, knowing what you really want and what you're going to put up with, and maybe you'll seek out a better fitting relationship or friendship. And it also gives each party a fresh start and the chance to seek happiness elsewhere, perhaps with someone more compatible or with someone with whom you may have more commonality. So it helps you grow as a person. So even though it can be painful and ending relationships aren't always easy, sometimes they can be beneficial in your long-term finding those right relationships for your life. So the quality of friendship networks in adults has not been negatively impacted by the rise of social networking, according to research. With online friendships, trust is a huge important factor, and that's going to affect the quality of your friendship networks in people's ages 25 to 74. And because of the ease of it, it is improving in the online age. So, are online friendships real friendships? Like I said before, it requires trust. So you have to trust that person's going to have your back, not to put stuff online, share stuff that, still you're taking a lot of trust because it's going out to the world. Online friendships can get stronger because you have that ease of communication. You don't have to wait forever to see them or even talk on the phone. You can, jot them on, DM, or you can just post, talk to them on Facebook, Instagram. And they have the same cycles as traditional friendships. And they're conducive for environment for shy people. So people that may normally be out in a social setting and have difficulty making friends may, it's much easier when you don't have to talk. Maybe it'd be easier for them to meet people and open up and trust them, and then be able to have more friendships. So just remember, heavy internet users tend to have the most friends, both online and offline. So with our history of development and knowing how boys and girls develop in their relationships, do you think there are differences between men and women's relationships as adults? Yes, we know that since they started forming friends and as young children, we know that they have developed the communication styles differently. So we know that women focus on emotional sharing and confiding in others, just like they did when they were a child, just like they did when they were teenagers. And men focus on around shared activities and interests. So again, that physical component, something they're doing, and where women are something they're talking about. So women tend to be talkers, and men tend to do something, have activities where they do. So men may go play golf, or watch a basketball game, or something where they're doing some kind of activity, where women just get together and chit chat for coffee, right? We tend to focus our relationship on different components. Another thing they found is that women can be unhappy even with a large number of friends, since friendships can be demanding. So a lot of that emotional sharing and confiding is could be very hard on a person. And so even though they have a lot of plans, they can still be unhappy. Men tend to have a small number of very close friends. So men tend to stick with smaller group, closer friends, and women tend to be larger group, they share a lot, maybe have a lot of friends, but maybe not as many close friends. So do you think that's true? Do you see that in your friends? Do you see that in your own life? What do you think? So now we're going to come to the age-old question. Can a man and woman just be friends without having a romantic interest? Well, let's see. Men with cross-sex friendships show lower dating anxiety and have a higher capacity for intimacy. So that means, men that have more women friends actually do better in dating and are better to their partners. They can be more intimate because they learned, having those female friends. Have you seen that, right? They start to understand how the female communicates and can have better communication in their own relationship. Third-party spouses, etc. Men are over-perceive and women under-perceive their friends' sexual interest in them. And maintaining friendships after one person is married or in an exclusive relationship. So third-party spouses, etc., may misperceive these friendships, and discourage them because they may not trust them. They may think that they, are having some kind of sexual interest in them. It's very common for that. It's hard to trust someone. It's just hard to have that complete when they're not your friend, right? When you don't know the intentions. And the studies show that men think that women are overly attracted to their male friends, and women think that men aren't as attractive, and that they tend to underperceive and men overperceive. So maintaining friendships once one person is married or in an exclusive relationship is difficult because that jealousy factor comes out. And, friendships and relationships are really close. So sometimes, when they've shared a lot with another friend and you want them to share that now with that partner, those friendships can suffer. So now let's take a look at love relationships. So there are 3 basic components of love. So think about a time you've been in love, or maybe you're in love right now. So did you have these 3 basic components? Passion, intimacy, and commitment. Passion is an intense physiological desire for each other, right? Your heart races, your palms get sweaty, you get, just a physical reaction. Intimacy is sharing all thoughts, actions with others. Your deepest, darkest thoughts that you wouldn't share with anybody else. And commitment, willingness to stay with others through good times and bad. So that's kind of like when they're, when it's a rough spot, maybe someone lost their job. You think about COVID times right now, or someone's sick, or, willing to write off those rough patches and experience the good and bad. So early on, passion is high, right? Because we're at that attraction stage, just like we talked about in that ABCDE bundle model. Passion is high because you're attracted. You got that, butterflies and the heart racing, and intimacy and commitment are low because that's just infatuation, right? When you're just having the physical reaction, it's just infatuation yet. You don't know if it's love because you don't have the intimacy and commitment to show and grow and see if it's really love. As love grows, passion and intimacy decline, but commitment increases. So let's look more into love relationships. We're going to look at authoritative mating, and that's the theory that states that people find partners based on their similarity to each other. So education levels, physical attractiveness, religion. So you're going to find those common grounds. So have you heard, people say, oh, she's a 6 and he's a 6, so they come together, right? Or, similar interests, or belong to the same church, same education level. So it's that idea that she's just kind of attracted to very similar, to partners that have similar likes, interests, and maybe even looks. Meeting at school are likely to result in similarities. If you're meeting at a place where the ski club and you both like to ski, then you're going to start to find, you're going to start to have a common ground already. Speed dating allows for meeting several people in a short period of time, and it's practiced mostly by young adults, right? So it's a quick way to find out if you're going to have that immediate, attraction, have some kind of interest, and then if not, move on. So what do you guys think of speed dating? Would you ever do speed dating? Do you think it gives you enough time to find the person, or do you only need a little bit to know if that's someone that you're going to date? So 1 in 5 couples in the U.S. meet online. So I'm sure some of you guys have met your significant others, your spouses online. My sister met her husband online. So obviously it's huge and getting bigger at industry every year. But even with people meeting more online, physical attractiveness still strongly influences the selection of partners initially, right? So just like Tinder, when you swipe left or right, it's that physical attraction that makes that initial decision whether you're going to, continue and choose that person to even start dating. So how does physical attractiveness affect online dating? So first impressions are driven mainly by the perceived attractiveness of the person's photo. So I've seen movies and TV shows, where they make a comedy out of, choosing that right, online picture where, hysterics come because they chose the wrong one. So, because first impressions are so important in online dating. Secure romantic attachments are the norm in 80% of the world's cultures. So having a romantic relationship is the norm. So how they've discovered these relationships has gone from, just meeting from friends or in public to now this online environment. But people are still seeking these romantic attachments, and they're the norm for 80% of the world's culture. So no matter where you are, 80% of the world is looking for some type of secure romantic attachment. And they found that children with a secure attachment see their parent as a secure base from which they can venture out and independently explore the world. A secure adult has a similar relationship with their romantic partner. So if they feel secure in that relationship and they feel connected, they allow themselves and their partner to move freely. So if you're having that secure attachment, you have that home base, it allows you the confidence to go out in the world and, try new things, maybe to do things that you wouldn't normally do, try for a job that you maybe not normally do because you know that you have a safety net. You have someone that cares for you and stay in that secure attachment. Similar to as when we talked about the baby, looking at their mother or caregiver, knowing that they explore the world because they have that secure attachment that secure base that's going to take care of them if they don't succeed. So knowing that statistics that 80% of the world are looking for some kind of secure attachment, we know that this global pattern exists in mate selection and romantic relationships. And culture is a huge force in shaping mate selection. For example, in some cultures like China, people tend to choose based on the status hierarchy. So they tend to choose if you're in the same socioeconomic or you have a high paying, respectable job, they want to stay, you're going to marry somebody that has that same level. So they like to stay in their same level of education, money. And when you try to mate out of that, some cultures, some people, in the older culture in China may look down on that. They found that access to good healthcare, education, and other resources tends to lead to more secure romantic attachments. Again, it's that theory. If you're thriving and not just surviving, if you've got good healthcare, you've educated, you're not worried about your next meal, you're not living in areas where there's high crimes, and you have other resources, then you are allowed to go out and look for relationships that are secure and romantic, because you're not just trying to take care of yourself and survive. Now you can thrive. And 95% of Indian marriages are arranged. Matchmaking also common in Muslim countries. So I actually knew when I went to PT school 7 years ago, I actually was a student, an Indian male in my class who had an arranged marriage, and they met and they became friends, but it was definitely an arranged marriage. So do you know anybody that has had an arranged marriage, or have you seen it, and what are your ideas on that? What they found is among 48 cultures globally, those that have access to good healthcare, education, and other resources that allow the young adults to select their own mate tend to lead to more secure romantic attachments than those from cultures that do not have those characteristics. And cultural norms are highly resistant to change. Arranged marriages are a major way that cultures can ensure an appropriate match on key dimensions. Matchmaking occurs through family connections and personal advertisements, and in some cases online. This adds pressure for the individual to make their own decisions regarding the selection and commitment away from traditional matchmaking, as urbanization and globalization affects those cultures. So would you ever be set up in an arranged marriage? Could you imagine if your parents had set that? And if you could, or you know someone and you have experience in that, what are some of the good and bad things that you find with that? But just remember that the research shows that those that select their own mates tend to have a more secure romantic relationship, because it actually shows on similar interests, right? So now let's take a look at when relationships don't go well and resort to violence. So first, let's take a look at abusive relationship. An abusive relationship is defined as a relationship that becomes violent, or in which one person becomes aggressive toward a partner. Sometimes what happens in an abusive relationship, you get a battered woman syndrome. And that occurs when a woman believes that she cannot leave an abusive situation and may even go so far as to kill her abuser. So we see that in the news a lot. They just get pushed so much to a corner because she feels maybe she can't leave financially, or maybe she can't, she doesn't feel like she has anywhere to go. And so she just ends up striking back her abuser, and a lot of times ends up in the abuser's death. And then many college students report experiencing abuse in a dating relationship. So have you had any type of abuse, a physical abuse, mental abuse? It says that nearly half, 43% of dating college women report experiencing violent and abusive dating behaviors. College students are not equipped to deal with dating abuse. 57% say it is difficult to identify. So you can't tell if it's really abuse, or they're just being, where's that line between, being mean and being abusive. And 58% say they don't know how to help someone who's experiencing it. Have you felt that? What do you do if your friend tells you they're experiencing abuse? What advice would you give them? How would you, what do you do? 1 in 3, 36% dating college students have given a dating partner their computer online access, email, or social network passwords. And these students are more likely to experience digital dating abuse. So that's a new thing. So definitely when I was dating, 20 something years ago, this digital dating abuse was not, we didn't even have that. So now with the internet, that takes it up, right? The verbal abuse, the getting into the accounts and, taking hijacking and saying all these awful things. So 36% of those who share their passwords are more likely to experience some kind of digital dating abuse. And if you've had it or seen it, what do you think are some of the triggers for that? 1 in 6, which is 16% of college women, have been sexually abused in a dating relationship. So as we talked about dating and abuse in our last week with adolescents, and we're seeing that carries on into young adulthood as these relationships, as we talked about, right, tend to have more alcohol, more partying, atmosphere where both people may not be in full capacity and decisions are impaired. And then also with the development of the brain, we know the brain isn't fully developed in that logic, and that had a lot of impulsivity. So that logic or that stuff that would bring you back from the decisions isn't fully developed as well. And along with this, not having the experience of knowing how to handle these situations can all contribute to staying in abusive relationships, or not recognizing the signs, or knowing how to get help, or knowing how to help your friends. So these statistics definitely show that there's a problem, and maybe you guys have experienced some of this firsthand. But again, violence and abuse in a relationship is not uncommon, unfortunately, especially amongst the college set, as women especially. There is a continuum of aggressive behavior toward a partner, which progresses from verbal aggression to physical aggressive behavior to severe physically aggressive behaviors to murder. So we're going to take a look at the next slide to see some of those identifiers and the contributing factors. But just know that underlying causes of aggressive behaviors differ as the type of aggressive behaviors change. So as you work through this continuum, the underlying causes differ. So let's take a look at the next slide. So this figure shows the continuum of progressive behaviors in abusive relationships. So you can look and see under verbal aggression, you have insults, yelling, name calling. Makes sense, verbal aggression. Then as you progress, then it leads to physical aggression, maybe pushing, slapping, shoving. Then it moves to severe aggression, beating, punching, hitting with an object, then to murder. So you can see those causes. Remember, we talked about those causes change as you go through this continuum. So when you're just throwing those verbal aggressions, maybe it's your need to control, or your misuse of power, or you're jealous, or you have marital discord or argument. Then that leading to physical aggression, some of the causes of that could be you accept violence as a means of control. That's how you exert your control. Modeling physical aggression. Your parents were like this, so this is how the only way you know how to deal with conflict. You were abused as a child, so because you're abused, that's how you act out. That's the only way you know how to act. You have an aggressive personality style. We talked a little bit about that as the children were progressing through middle age and adolescence. And alcohol abuse. So anytime you bring in alcohol, the drugs in it, it alters your way of thinking and can escalate that physical aggression. And then severe aggression into murder, you may have a personality disorder. So you might actually have a psychological disorder that may make it difficult, or you might be unable to tell the difference between right or wrong, or have feeling of hurting someone, not having that empathy. You might be emotional lability. So that again is that not feeling of compassion or empathy, or even feeling anything when you're hurting these people. It doesn't affect you. And then poor self-esteem. So because you hate yourself so much, you're taking it out on another person. In reality, is you're just taking that and punishing them like you would want to punish yourself. So overall, they actually say 2 contributing factors can be job stresses and unemployment. And anything that can trigger these these like kind of dormant traits in you while you're living your life. You lost your job, your girlfriend broke up, your girlfriend tries to break up with you. So something can trigger these things that are just kind of resting in your body, in your brain, that you've developed over the years. So 5 million women and 3 million men experience partner-related physical assaults or rape annually in the United States. 10 to 69% of women worldwide report being sexually abused or raped. That's a pretty huge range. Men are victims of relationship violence at 1/3 the rate of women in the United States, but it still occurs. And relationship violence also occurs in gay and lesbian relationships. So no matter what type of relationship you have, there's always the potential for violence between the two people. Intimate partner violence is domestic violence by a current or former spouse or partner in an intimate relationship against the other spouse or partner. So intimate partner violence, or IPV, can take a number of forms, including physical, verbal, emotional, economic, withholding money, and sexual abuse. The World Health Organization defines IPV as any behavior within an intimate relationship that causes physical, psychological, or sexual harm to those in the relationship. It includes active physical aggression, sexual coercion, psychological abuse, and controlling behaviors. So all that, so much violence can occur between, men and women, same-sex relationships, no matter, where you are. 5 million women and 3 million men report that physical assault or rape annually in the United States. So definitely a problem that needs to be addressed. International data indicates that rates of abuse are higher in cultures that emphasize female purity, male status, and family honor. And despite the availability of women's shelters and counseling, some women still live in fear of abuse from their husbands. So culture is an important factor in understanding partner abuse. Violence against women internationally reflects culture, traditions, and beliefs from patriarchal-driven societies. Behavior such as sexual slavery, female genital cutting, which if you've ever seen that, so it keeps, it's crazy. They take the 13-year-olds to ensure that they're stay pure for their relationships. Intimate partner violence and honor killings are noted. Rates are also higher in those cultures that emphasize female purity, so that's what I was talking about, that male status and family honor. Although many communities have established shelters, like I said, for battered women and programs that treat abusive men, the legal systems in many localities are not set up to deal with domestic violence. So, has any of you, if you've experienced domestic violence, did you feel like there was a safe place for you to go? Or if you've had friends that do it, do you think we're equipped? And even say in Kern County, if for domestic violence and disputes, would there be a safe place for women here in town, or men, to seek shelter for a new life and for their children's life? So definitely something to think about, when we think about violence in relationships, and where does that stem from, and what are our resources? So now we're going to move on to lifestyles. We're going to delve into these questions. Why do some people decide to remain single, and what are those people like? What are the characteristics of cohabiting people? What are gay and lesbian relationships like? And what is marriage like through the course of adulthood? So all these things that emerge, that young adults start to begin in their 20s and carry on through, the rest of their lives. Let's take a look at these. So let's take a look at some statistics and stereotypes of single people. So what they found is that an overwhelming majority of men and women aged 20 to 24 are single. So a lot different than in the 70s, when that was the typical marrying age was, early 20s. Now typical marrying age is 27 for a female and 29 for a male. And there are numerous stereotypes and biases against single people. So I know for a fact when I was single and I had my first job in therapy. Everybody assumed that I would work every holiday, that I never wanted time off because I didn't have a family. My time as a single person was never as important as someone that had a family and their time off. So have you found any biases or stereotypes if you've been single now, or if you, like me, were single and now married, that you can see the difference? So some of the statistics that they found is that men tend to marry at a later age than women. Fewer men remain single, and there's a large age range of partners to choose from. So you don't always have to stick in your same age group. So let's look at some more trends in singlehood. So research has found that there are ethnic differences in singlehood. Young adult African Americans are twice as likely to be single as young European Americans, and that they are finding that singlehood is increasing among Latino Americans. There are also cultural implications of singlehood. So one culture they looked at is Muslim Malaysian women, and they believe they are single because God has decided that they should not meet their mate at this time. So that's a cultural implication. So if they are single, then that's the reason why. And for most people, the decision to never marry is a gradual one. So it's not usually made, right away. It's as they live their life experience, they decide that maybe marriage is just not for me. So now we're going to look at cohabitation. People in committed, intimate sexual relationships living together but not married. So why cohabitate? Why cohabit? What it does is that they found that when they've done research on it, people have said it tests the relationships for the potential of marriage. So they want to see if they can live, dating and being committed and not being under the same roof is different than living together. So they want to see, can they do that before they get married? It's convenient. Maybe they need to share the rent, or you have a better apartment, or you live close to my work and we like each other. So why don't we just live together? And or it's an alternative to marriage. Maybe they don't really want to get married, but they still love each other and want to be together. So they're just going to live together. It's increasingly popular in the U.S. and other Western societies. So definitely a shift in ideals there. I know from when I was younger, it's definitely more looked down upon, and now it's quite a norm. Still, some religions and maybe some cultures look down on that, but much more accepted overall in society. So this is a bar graph of cohabitation, and it's the types of first unions among women aged 15 to 44 in the United States in 1995, 2002, and 2006 to 2010. So you can see no union, cohabitation, or marriage. So the red is 1995, green is 2002, and then blue is 2006 to 2010. So no union. So that's actually stayed pretty, 29, 27, 28. That stayed pretty consistent. Cohabitation, so you can see, like I was talking about, 1995 is when I was at Bakersfield College. So I can tell you, so look at just the difference between when I was at Bakersfield College and now, actually even 10 years ago. This number might even be bigger, right? So just the difference there in statistics on cohabitation. And then marriage. So marriage was higher when I was at BC, and then look how much lower it is now. So more people are cohabitating than getting married. Why do you think that? So they found that there is a global difference in cohabitation. In most European, South American, and Caribbean countries, cohabitation is a common alternative to marriage. And you can see that 99% of people in Sweden live together before marriage. That's almost 100%. That's almost expected when you say that they live together before marriage. So does cohabitation make marriages better? Well, the research and evidence shows no, and it actually may result in lower quality marriages. So they found with European American women with children prior to marriage, those were testing their relationship, actually didn't have as quality of marriage than those who didn't. And they have found that having cohabitated may have harmed their marriage. And longitudinal studies have found there are few differences in couples' behaviors after living together for many years, regardless of whether they married without cohabitating, cohabitated then married, or simply cohabitated. So behavior rarely changes after cohabitation. So it's not saying that sometimes, you're expecting you to grow or get better. Yeah, it's probably not going to change and maybe actually, hurt the relationship. So what do you guys think? Do you think that cohabitation is good before marriage? Do you think you should wait to live together until you're married? Do you think it can help? Do you think it's detrimental? What are you guys' thoughts? So now let's take a look at gay and lesbian couples. Gay and lesbian relationships have many similarities with heterosexual relationships. They tend to both be dual earner, share household chores, and other things. Gay men separate love and sex, much like heterosexual men. We learned that early on in adolescence when boys and men tend to look at sex as an encounter, and where women tend to look at it as love. Lesbians connect sex and emotional intimacy. They make commitments earlier, and they cohabitate more quickly. And they found that gay and lesbian couples are more likely to be different on demographic characteristics than heterosexual couples. They tend to be more dissimilar from one another, on these demographic characteristics. Gender differences are more important than differences in sexual orientation. So regardless of sexual orientation, men tend to separate love and sex and have more short-term relationships. So that's just gender, with that gender-based. And both lesbian and heterosexual women are more likely to connect sex and emotional intimacy in fewer but longer lasting relationships. So, men and women still, have the same way of communicating. They're just, now you're having the same sex relationships. You're still going to see those trends in the way that lesbian women communicate with each other and gay men communicate with each other are still going to be based in those gender differences. And they found that that's more important than the differences in sexual orientation. So overall, gay and lesbian couples receive less support from family members than do either married or cohabitating couples. But attitudes towards same-sex relationships and marriage are changing rapidly in the United States. Same-sex marriage is now legal in the United States. They have inheritance rights, and they're able to visit loved ones in the hospital. So now let's take a look at marriage, the next step in a love relationship. So this chart shows the median age at first marriage in the United States. And it shows that it has increased slightly more for women than for men since the 1970s. So you can see, as I was talking about earlier, in 1970s, in those early 20s, so it looked like for women it was about 22, and for men it's maybe about, 21 for a woman and about 23 for a male. And now we look at it, it's about 29 for a man and about 27 for a woman. So looking at that last figure, we know that marriage often occurs during young or middle adulthood. And the median age at first marriage has been rising over time, which lessens the likelihood of divorce for women. And let's look at some definitions of marriage. Marital success, that refers to any marital outcome. Marital quality is a subjective measure of a marriage based on several dimensions. Marital adjustment is a degree to which husbands and wives accommodate each other over a certain time, that compromise. And marital satisfaction is a global assessment of a person's marriage. So what predicts a successful marriage? There are several key predictors of future success in marriages. The age of the partners, the older the better. The younger the partners are, especially teens to early 20s, the greater the chance they will end in divorce. Why do you think that? A lot of they haven't found their identity, have a lot of stressors, and maybe, they decided the person that they are in their 20s isn't the person they are in their 30s. Maybe their goals don't align because they're still developing so much. Homogamy is the sharing of similar values and interests, and that increases the likelihood of the marriage lasting, which makes sense. If you have things more in common, you're more likely to have a successful marriage. And then this feeling of equality in the marriage. That's according to the exchange theory, and it's based on each other's contributing something to the relationship that the other would be hard pressed to find. And that's that feeling that the relationship is equal. And a marriage is based on each partner contributing something that maybe, the other partner is lacking in. If one is really outgoing, the other one's shy, that brings that shy person out, or one's, really good with finances and the other person likes to spend, they're balancing that themselves out. So they're contributing to something in the relationship that the other would be hard pressed to find. So here's the age-old question. Do married couples stay happy? Well, this figure, let's take a look at this figure. So this is a marital satisfaction figure, and what it shows is that marital satisfaction is highest early on and in later life, and it drops off during the child-rearing years. So we can understand that's a lot of stressors during that time. So marriage satisfaction is highest at the beginning of the marriage, falls until the children begin leaving home, and rises again later in life. Some couples, though, never rebound, and satisfaction remains low, leading to an emotional divorce. So when there is unequal dependence in the marriage, stress and conflict are likely. The key to longevity and happiness is learning to deal with the changing patterns in the marriage. Right? If you're able to compromise and deal with the changes, because life is going to give you changes, and grow together, you're more likely to have a happier, long marriage. If you grow apart during those challenges, then you're more likely to get divorced. Marital satisfaction varies widely, and that would be, definitely the case. How a couple reacts to stresses and changes in the marriage determine whether they will stay married or get divorced. So this figure shows the vulnerability stress at the adaptation model, and it shows how adapting to vulnerabilities and stress can result in either adaptation or dissolution of the marriage. And you can see that you have enduring vulnerabilities, initial satisfaction, and external stressors. And as you add external stressors and enduring vulnerabilities to this initial satisfaction, and then you go through the adaptive process, changes in your marital satisfaction, either you go back to, initial satisfaction, or you go to marriage dissolution. Carney and Bradbury propose a vulnerability stress adaptation model of marriage, which views marital quality as a dynamic process resulting from the couple's ability to handle stressful events in the context of their particular vulnerabilities and resources. So how should the early stages of marriage be approached? So early in the marriage, couples must learn to adjust to the different expectations and perceptions that each person has for the other. They need to be flexible and have compromise and listen to the other person and see the other person's side. They need to learn to handle confrontations and resolve conflicts and not internalize or, hold grudges. And during parenthood, where we saw that dip, remember, in marital satisfaction, can cause stress, and it leaves less time to focus on their marriage, because now they're focusing on the children instead of each other. They can lose that bond, that connection, that communication, and sometimes never get it back. Childless couples also experience a decline in marital satisfaction. Disillusionment is likely. And long separations early in a marriage can be problematic. So if you're not spending enough time with each other, it's easy to just, break those bonds and, not continue on that path of marriage. Young married military couples face special types of stress on the relationship. So if you had parents that were, or maybe a parent that was in the military, or you have a spouse that's in the military, you can definitely relate. That's a long time where they're not just on a business trip. They have these long-term deployments. So what they found is if a military spouse believes that deployment will make the marriage stronger, it is likely to become stronger. So this is how they view it, how they view the marriage and the strength in the marriage. Then they just found statistically, then it's more likely to turn out that way. It's definitely a difficult situation, just for the spouses, but also for the children. So with all that said and done, how do you keep a marriage happy? So here's some key elements. It involves work. There's no secret, right? You just have to work at it. You need to be able to adapt and change. Can't be rigid for something to be successful, for a relationship to be successful. You need to keep the romance in the relationships. You need to share religious beliefs and spirituality. You need to be clear and honest communication. So couples who remain happy show an ability to adapt and change. Stress and resistance strategies can make a couple's bond stronger, even after serious problems. And honest communication of thoughts, actions, and feelings, especially when dealing with stressful areas of relationship. Sharing religious beliefs and communication also helps keep the marriage happy because you're sharing that commonality. Not saying that you can't have successful marriages with different religious beliefs, but definitely easier when you share the same beliefs. So this sounds easy on paper, but it's definitely work, and it's definitely hard to maintain all this all the time with the stressors of life. So you have to have two committed people that want to make this work, right? So, marriages start off happy, they don't all end happy, but what have been some of your guys' life experience, either as seeing your parents or being in a marriage, or maybe you've been divorced, or maybe you've had some hills that you've had to get over and you've come back and you've used some of these strategies. So think about that as you're going through this. Do you believe that these are the key elements to keep a marriage happy? So now we're going to take a look at the family life cycle. We're going to be asking these questions. What are the common forms of families? Why do people have children? And why do some choose not to? What is it like to be a parent? What differences are there in types of parenting? So, we all are somebody's child, and some of you are parents, and some of you come from many different forms of family. So let's take a look and see what this family life cycle is. So you may have heard that saying, the nuclear family, and only your nuclear family can do something. That's a type of family consisting of only parents and children. It's most common in Western societies. Extended family, grandparents and other relatives live with parents and children. That's not considered your nuclear family. That's considered the extended family. The most common form around the world is the extended family, and that's all the grandparents and other relatives living with the parents and children. So I know I had a friend who, they lived back in Rhode Island, and as a child she said her parents lived on one floor and her grandparents lived on the floor above. So that definitely that sense of nuclear family and staying close to your extended family. So how do you decide whether you want to have children? Have you always wanted a child and you've already had their names picked out when you were 8 or 9? Or has it never even crossed your mind? Research shows that potential parents do not think deeply about the decision of whether or not to have children. What they found that benefits of becoming pregnant, children add affection, improve family ties, and add a sense of immortality and accomplishment because your genes are living on through them and their children and their children. Some concerns for having children is expenses, but children also add much to the lives of parents, but they do cost a lot. So I think I've heard one time statistically cost $250,000 to raise a child from 0 to 18. So definitely expensive. So the verdict is most people believe that the benefits outweigh the negatives. Do you believe that the benefits outweigh the negatives for having children? So there's not just one right or wrong answer on whether you want to have children. Reasons adults are child-free vary. Some of it's just a personal choice. Some it's because they have financial instability. And some, they don't have a choice. They have fertility problems as they are infertile. Childless couples do have some perceived advantages And those also vary. They may have higher marital satisfaction because they don't have the stressors of a child. They have more freedom. They don't have to, again, have the routine of the child. They're free to go wherever they want. They're not restricted by the necessity to care for that child. And they just tend to have higher standards of living because if we talked about the expensive, so if you're not paying $250,000 to raise a child, you have a lot more higher standard of living because you can actually put it into your own living and your own trips and your own financial gains. So let's take a look at the parental role. So the timing of parenthood is important in understanding parenting, right? We talked about timing is everything. You have that 17-year-old, 16-year-old pregnant woman opposed to the 30-year-old. Going to have a lot of different resources. So the average age of women at time of first childbirth has been rising. Marriage has been rising, so it's waiting for it to have a child. Currently 26 years of age in the United States. Many women postponing children due to marrying later, establishing careers, etc. A lot of women are freezing their eggs, right, to keep those eggs healthy. I can tell you, in one of my videos, I told you I had my daughter through we did in vitro, and I was 33 at the time, and they told me my eggs were so good because at 34 your eggs are considered mature. So definitely a new trend in that. What they found is that older parents tend to spend more time with their children and they tend to be more supportive. They're more affectionate, they're more sensitive, and they're more supportive to them. And fathers in their 30s generally spend more time with their children, but mothers are still doing the majority of child rearing. And they found that parenting skills must be learned. Disagreements over division of labor can result. So they need to understand, what is the father's role, the mother's role, what are the roles in parenthood, since most are both working outside the home. And we can understand why older parents may be more at ease and want to spend more time because they have more financial security, they waited longer, they were able to live their youth, and they have more patience now. They're slowing down, so they are ready to play more and be more sensitive. Opposed to a younger parent, maybe have more energy and they may be more active and more of that, but they still may feel like they're missing out on certain things or not being emotionally or financially mature to take care of that child as well. So there's pros and cons to both. So ethnic background also plays a role in the parental role. African American husbands are more likely than European American fathers to help with household chores and childcare. African American parents tend to provide strong religious beliefs and a proud cultural heritage. And they found that tribal Native Americans spend considerable amount of time imparting cultural values that are very different from those that European Americans have. Latino and Asian American families both value familialism, the idea that the well-being of the family takes precedence over the concerns of individual family members. So the idea that the whole is bigger than the part, so what benefits the family is more important than what benefits that individual. Asian American families also value familialism. In addition to getting good grades in school, discipline, being concerned about what others think, and conformity are also included in that, with high expectations of their children. So if you are from these ethnic backgrounds, do you agree with the research? Do you feel like you saw that in your families growing up? Can you relate to some of that familialism? So what challenges do multi-ethnic families have? So raising multi-ethnic children presents challenges not experienced by parents of same-race children. You have discrimination and prejudiced behavior from others, worries that children may be rejected by both racial communities, and mothers play a key role in establishing their children's cultural identity. So, have you experienced anybody who's had multi-ethnic or from a multi-ethnic family? Have you experienced that prejudice? If you were raised by your mother who's that ethnic background, have you been rejected by the other ethnic background? What are some of the things that you've seen in this parental role, and how has it affected your development? So, more than 40% of mothers in the United States are unwed. So, how do single parents and their children get by? Single parents are faced with many unique problems, including complex feelings, loneliness, financial obstacles, and dating challenges. Parents experience feelings of frustration and guilt, right? Because feel like they're not giving their child enough time. They're frustrated with having to take care of everything. Financial difficulties, especially for single mothers. Parents feel insecure about dating and sexuality because they have a child. So, if any of you guys are single mothers or were raised by a single parent or even single fathers, have you experienced some of these feelings? Do you agree with it? Do you disagree? What are some of the things that you've gone through as a single parent or as the child of a single parent? So the dynamics in blended families are a complex system. For step parents, adoptive parents, and foster parents, concerns exist over bonding with a child that is not biologically theirs. So stepchildren often experience behavioral and emotional problems. And one of the best ways to form those bonds is to allow stepchildren to develop a relationship with the step parent at their own pace, to not force the situation. Adopted parents must acknowledge that adopted children may want to seek their biological parents, and they need to accept that. So I think it's getting easier with open adoptions and more communication, whereas 30, 40 years ago, there's a lot of secrecy and that feeling of, you don't love me as your parents. But now I think it's much more open, in that idea, the sense of knowing, where you came from and what your genes and having people look like you and seeing people that look like you, knowing that doesn't take away from the loving family that your adopted parents gave to you. Another unique challenge is with children adopted from another culture. So they may struggle with how to maintain culture of origin when they are not that culture. So incorporating that into that child's life, making sure they still have those experiences. And there also will be struggles of looking different. Can be mean, the outside world can be mean. So how do they deal with that in a positive way, and in a loving way, so that these children can grow and be, with correct development and to successful adults. So it's definitely a concern, but there's so many children that need to be adopted, and loving adoptive parents, are the best thing for any child. And I actually work with a coworker who's adopted 4 children. They're all under 4 under 6, and it's been one of the best situations she ever had. So adoption is an awesome thing. There's so many kids that need it. So recognizing these challenges and preparing these for the children that you have will help make that transition so much easier. So another relationship is foster parenting, which may be difficult to establish bonds due to time constraints of just short times there while the family may be getting their life back on track. And good foster care is still important in developing attachment. Foster parents tend to have the most tenuous relationships with their children. And it results from that, maybe there's been kids that are in and out of foster care. This is their 5th foster family. So how do you still maintain those attachments when the kid knows they're not going to be long term? That's definitely a difficult situation. So now we're going to take a look at divorce and remarriage. We looked at it from the child's perspective. Now we're going to look at it from the adult's perspective. So who gets divorced? How does the divorce affect parental relationships with children? And what are remarriages like? How are they similar to and different from their first marriages? So this is a figure of the divorce rate between the United States and other European countries. And what you can see here is that the United States has one of the highest divorce rates in the world. So why? Well, look at that. And odds are about a 50-50 chance that a new marriage will end in divorce. So it looks like that Japan had the lowest trend right there in 2008 of divorce, and overall Italy has the lowest overall trend of divorce. So it'd be interesting to see why certain cultures have more likely to divorce than others. So why do couples get divorced? Well, there's several factors such as ethnicity and social norms contribute to the high divorce rate. Research noted that negative emotions displayed during conflict between the couples predict early divorce, but not later divorce. An early divorce usually is preceded with negative emotions during conflict, and later divorce usually results of a lack of positive emotions. So what that means is that early at divorce, you're saying a lot of negative stuff. And that usually result, when you're in conflict. So you might just say, you're this and you're that and you're that. Whereas in later divorce, maybe you don't just say anything positive. So you don't, maybe you're not saying a lot of negative, but you're just not saying anything positive. You may have that negative component as well, but you don't have the positive to balance it out. And a covenant marriage expands the marriage contract to a lifelong commitment between the partners within a supportive community. It's a controversial approach designed to prevent divorce. So what do you think of that? Does a covenant marriage sound good to you? So how does divorce affect the couple? Effects of divorce on the couple are complex, not a simple act. You have feelings of disappointment, rejection, etc. Divorce takes a high psychological toll, and the transition is often difficult. A situation called this divorce hangover. That difficulty to transition to post-divorce life. You may have been married 20, 25 years, and now you're suddenly single. How do you be a single person again? How do you do your life without that other person that's been in your life so long? Middle-aged and elderly women are at a disadvantage for remarrying, and many divorced women experience difficult financial hardships. So divorce in middle age or later has special characteristics with financial hardships. Maybe they didn't have a career. Maybe they stayed home and took care of the kids, so they lack that job security, or they took time off to raise their kids and they're going back into the job market and it's not quite what it is, or they're behind in pay. So different things, and middle-aged and elder women, are less likely to remarry than their male counterparts. Why do you think that? So what happens to children after divorce? Relationships with children definitely are impacted by divorce. Custody tends to be awarded to the mothers, but they tend to lack financial resources. Fathers pay the psychological price of not being involved in their child's lives. Many fathers wish to remain active in their children's lives, but custody and child support laws make it difficult to do so. A collaborative divorce is an alternative resolution process for couples who want to negotiate a solution. And the long-lasting negative effects for children experience divorce at any age. Poor relations with parents, difficulties in their own romantic relationships, maybe they don't trust in love, or they don't think things are going to end up happy, or they may end up in divorce, or they've seen their parents argue, or the way they handle all that, can carry over into their relationships. A collaborative divorce is a voluntary, contractually based alternative dispute resolution process for couples who want to negotiate a resolution of their situation rather than having a ruling imposed upon them by a court or arbitrator. This approach tends to create less conflict, greater father involvement, so maybe a better 50-50 custody, and better outcomes for children compared to traditional divorce. Young adults whose parents divorce experience a great deal of emotional vulnerability and stress, and the effect of experiencing the divorce of one's parents while growing up can be long-lasting and affect their future relationships. So the trauma of divorce does not deter people from beginning new relationships, as most remarry, although younger generations tend to remarry at a lower rate than older generations. Divorced people typically wait about 3.5 years before they remarry, and subsequent marriages have a 25% higher divorce rate. That's kind of a scary statistic. So if your first marriage didn't last, you have an even higher divorce rate than before. Although women are more likely to initiate a divorce, they are less likely to remarry. So most men remarry more than women, but most women initiate the divorce. And adapting to new relationships and remarriage is stressful, and the effects of remarriage on children are positive. So they get that more, children see that familiar unit again, and they may feel like that security come back. So they actually have positive effects on children. And again, some things that are characteristics of that second marriage, role definitions are less clear than in a first marriage because you're coming in already as much more as an established adult, opposed to maybe learning your roles together. You've already done a role for so long. And again, women are less likely to remarry than men. Women are more likely to initiate a divorce, and women tend to benefit more from remarriage, and partly because that could be why, because it could be the financial security as well that a lot of women lose when they divorce. Now, I'd be curious to see the statistics, as we continue to, as time goes by, as more women and men, are working in the comparable jobs and so forth. So that is our end of Chapter 11, Week 9. You have your discussion group, and you have your attendance assignment, and your 2 homework quizzes for 10 and 11. And remember that your outlines are due the 25th. And if you have any questions, email me and look at the Zoom recording and announcements for your PowerPoints. Okay, have a great week, and I'll see you next week.